Thank you all for being here. Good to see you all. Chairman Nichols, let me begin with you. In the 2013 and 2015 sessions, for branding purposes, were thought of at the time and are thought of in retrospect as infrastructure sessions. We were concerned as a legislature with infrastructure. 2013, that infrastructure challenge happened to be water. We had come out of the worst one-year drought in the history of Texas, and that was really where our focus was. 2015 was, in many respects, a transportation session. A lot of the bills that had been coming due came due. You all focused on funding and a bunch of other issues. Now we're in 2017. Do we have any reason to think that we're going to be thinking about infrastructure really at all in the next session? Do people who care about transportation have a hope that this issue is even going to surface in the next session?
We'll always be talking about transportation. It's one of the three big issues: education, transportation, and water.
Right.
And so we'll be talking about transportation, different ways to do it, different ways to implement what we're doing, different ways to improve the approaches of funding and which projects and things like that. I will point out that in 2013, you mentioned the water, 2013 also produced Proposition 1, which captured a portion of the oil and gas severance taxes,
True.
which was on the ballot in actually 2014.
Right.
So 2013, 2015, both were transportation funding sessions.
Yeah. I guess my question is, are you going to have a third crack at the ball again? I mean, because really 13 and 15 did focus so much on this set of issues. I just wonder if we'll be able to go back to the well a third time.
If you're asking, or am I going to be pushing to try to get more funding for transportation in 20, and the answer is no. I think
I guess we can all leave, right? That's it.
Yeah. No,
most people in the audience were waiting for the answer to that question.
Okay, and the answer is because we put in a phased-in set of conditions.
Yes.
So these dollars phase in,
Yes.
and what's going to be really important is to make sure that we follow TxDOT and TxDOT implements it.
Yeah.
And we get the projects out and make sure they're the right projects for the right reasons. And that's going to take several more years.
It's really a continuation of business that was done in the last.
Yes, and so I don't feel comfortable going back, particularly in a really tight session, which this will be.
We'll come to that. Right.
And asking for more money when we haven't implemented all the money that we have already gotten.
Right.
So
yeah.
I think it's too early for that.
Representative Israel, you know, we spend a lot of time, all of us in our business and in your business, in the months prior to a session doing these conversations before groups like this one. Let's preview the session. Let's talk about the issues. And I've been listening to what I've been hearing from members and from people in leadership. And what I hear is, well, we obviously have to figure out what to do about school finance, since the court told us that the school finance system was really, really, really bad, just not bad enough for them to do anything about, right? Or we have to blow up the foster care system and rebuild it. I'm hearing about a lot of pressing challenges. I confess to you, not at one of these previews have I heard anybody mention transportation as a pressing issue.
I agree with you, neither have I. And I also would suggest that our foster care system is long overdue for leadership.
You're prepared to make that call and say that's a more important issue this time than transportation?
Well, transportation has a huge impact on our future economic viability, but generation after generation, we have also foregone the opportunity to do the right thing by our children's public school education, which also has even more significant role on our future economic viability. And it was called Byzantine by the courts. So I hope that we will be able to address that.
Is this decision to prioritize, say, foster care or public education, Representative Israel, ahead of transportation, assuming that's what happens, a decision being made top down, which is to say elected officials deciding that, or bottom up? I actually was interested to see in the UT Texas Tribune poll that came out in the last couple of weeks, that when you ask Texans about their priorities, what are the issues most important to them, transportation is like 10th. Mm-hmm. It's actually down way below a bunch of other issues. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if the public maybe is with you in thinking that there may be other things this time that should occupy more time and attention.
Well, I've been talking to my voters. I've been block walking, right. And there is a lot of frustration that we seem to have misplaced priorities now in Texas. They're very engaged in knowing that we're heading into what could be a very divisive session along the lines of social issues, while we have to address our children's future. But I do think that there is an opportunity. I hope that there will be an opportunity this session to address transportation fixes that do not involve a significant amount of revenue.
Right.
So we can talk about that
later.
And
we will. And to the revenue point, let me ask Mr. Simmons, chair of the subcommittee, thinking about planning and thinking about money because all this stuff is in the same bucket. I woke up this morning and, like most people in Texas, rubbed my eyes and looked at the price of oil, right? And the price of oil today is about the mid-40s, mid-high 40s. We're not where we were in January when it was down to 26, but we're certainly not where we were 2 years ago if we were sitting here previewing the last session when it was up around $100. We're going to have less money in the budget next time. Does that make it even harder for you all to accomplish your ambitious goals for transportation?
Well, before you get started on that, I want to say that I don't know. I mean, usually when people from Austin come over here to A&M, you have to get special escorts to get back into Austin. They may try to block you at the thing, but I'm glad that y'all had the courage to come over here and participate in this.
They're very good and nice people. And
They are.
I'm not
No
sure you
question.
want to mess with her. I'm just saying. I'm not.
I just want
very envious
I'm
of
not
the
concerned.
football program.
I'm only concerned about safety. That's
I
it.
get that.
That's all.
Okay, good.
You had to go there, Ron. You
my
had to go
friend.
there.
So from a budget standpoint, even if you had
Right.
great aspirations for transportation as an issue, you all would be fighting with every other priority in the state
There's
for
no
fewer
question.
dollars this time.
But what we did, as Senator Nichols, yes, there's no question, fewer dollars. But what we did, as Senator Nichols pointed out, is we set up a vehicle in order that transportation does have multiple dedicated sources. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be flush all the time, and certainly oil has a direct impact on Proposition 1. Proposition 7, which we just passed in this last time, will be based on the total Texas economy. And do we get a certain level of sales tax revenue, $28 billion, which we are still on schedule to meet?
Schedule, right.
The next $2.5 billion will go towards road funding. And so I think that what we've done, what Senator Nichols and the rest of the legislature are smart in doing is having a broad base of funds that can come into that.
Yeah.
Now, all of these, and the good thing about transportation, you can't spend all the money at one time. These are long-term projects. TxDOT, or at least they shouldn't be, and then James Bass assures me that they're not. They don't send one big check out to a company and say, go build that road. They pay that out over time, and so
Right.
that serves well for us. But we do have to look at all different methods of how do we fund transportation. It's really a simple math decision as to whether it costs X for a road today, all right? That X will not stay X 10 years from now. It will be X plus, okay? If not X squared, it will be X plus for sure. And so we have to decide what's the best method of funding that road. If we need it today, what's the best method of doing that? Do we have the money to do it? Obviously, pay as you go is a preference. Or if we don't have the money, is it still cheaper to build it today using other financing methods, whether that's debt or transportation reinvestment zones, whatever that happens to be? We have to look at all those options because it's simply a math question.
Now, Chairman Nichols, both you and Representative Simmons have talked about the mechanism that you all put in place in the last session. I wanted to ask you if you felt like it was the right decision now with a little bit of time passed as you look back on it, as you constructed it. Clearly, when you set this mechanism in place, you didn't know certain things. You were assuming certain things, hoping certain things about the sources of that revenue. I just wonder if, all things considered, was it the right mechanism, knowing what you know now?
Yes, looking back, you make the best decisions you can at the time with the information you have at the time.
Right.
Even looking back, I think the decisions we all made were really good ones. As Representative Simmons said, we've got now a diversified portfolio. We're not totally dependent upon vehicle registration fees and fuel tax. We've got general revenues. We've got portion of the vehicle sales tax. We have a portion of the oil and gas severances.
Right. I mean, of course, that's the one that at the moment is maybe not producing. We worry that it's not producing the revenue that you anticipated.
But before the others kicked in,
Right.
we got a deposit of $1.7 billion the first year, $1.2 billion the second year, and $400 or $500 million third year. So that's almost $3.4 billion that would not have been there.
So if you could go back now knowing what you know, you would not redraw the lines around that funding mechanism that you put in place.
And I would predict that 10 and 20 years from now, that particular mechanism will be one of the larger ones.
Right.
Because if you historically look at oil and gas prices, it's like a sawtooth up and down, but it's a sawtooth at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
During the last peak and bust back in the 80s, I think the unbelievably high price of $40.
Right.
And then it went back down to 5, 6, and 7, and now the low was, here we are in the
About
40s.
26 bucks. But to Representative Simmons' point about the reliance on the overall Texas economy as a part of this, you know, we're insulated to a large degree from the fluctuation in oil prices. Oil and gas is only 14% of the Texas economy today. Controller reminds me it was 22% the last time that things went into the drink, and we went into the drink with it, so we're insulated. But again, you are betting a little bit on the come here, right? You are hoping that things remain stable.
That's why you want a diversified portfolio of income, which is what we have.
Right. Representative Israel, this is a question that no one will ever, I think, answer in the affirmative, but do we have as much money as we want? Wouldn't we like to have more? I mean, transportation is a very big ticket item if you go out 20 years. If you calculated everything that you'd like to have, it is a huge amount of money.
We don't have as much money as we need. We're still in a transportation crisis, in my view, despite the fact that we've dipped into and stepped up to spend more revenue because of the growth that we've been experiencing. But I also think that we haven't been, I think that Texas could be more thoughtful in planning and accepting the fact that we are an urban state. And there are multimodal solutions.
Well, let's stipulate, according to the last census numbers, 6 of the 20 largest cities in the country are now in Texas. Yeah. More than any other state. Any concept that we're not an urban state is just factually incorrect, right?
I was raised on the bus. My dad was a truck driver. We had to get on the bus. For me, as a girl growing up in El Paso, Texas, it was part of a way of life. Yeah. And I'm also a realtor, and my young clients that are buying homes have one car and they want to live as close to the urban core as possible. Right. So they forego the cost of that second vehicle, but that means they want to be by a bus line or something that helps them get into the urban core. So if we're relying,
to Representative Israel, if we're relying on vehicle sales taxes, actually there may be a shift in consumer habits that relate to this issue you're talking about that could ultimately turn back on us.
Well, there's two things. I passed a bill last session with the help of my colleagues that said for alternatively fueled vehicles, we will do an assessment of, if I asked them before last session, how many of them are there on Texas roads, DMV said, we don't know. So we passed a bill that would give us a count, but we don't have the fortitude to now assess a fee on those folks who own the Volt to help pay into the purse. Yeah. But I also think that there needs to be an opportunity to plan our roads for something like a dedicated bus so that there's an advantage to get on the bus, so that the bus is moving faster than traffic. And if we're planning it together, which we're doing one of these projects in my district, which means I'll be an old woman by the time it happens, but you have to plan for the future, that when we're upgrading a throughway, that we should always be thinking about safety, technology, and capacity. And maximizing capacity, in my view, means putting a high-capacity bus down the middle of it so that bus is moving.
So this is a very different conversation than we might have been having 20 years ago, but just based on
Unfortunately. If you look at Dallas is going gangbusters with transit, but it took planning back in the 90s to make it happen.
Representative Simmons, Representative Israel did not ask or say this, and so let me actually do it, not necessarily on her behalf, but because I was thinking she might have said this. Maybe we need more sources of revenue beyond the ones that we already have. Maybe we need to see an increase in the vehicle registration fee. My understanding, at least as of a couple of years ago, from my friends at TxDOT, was that the Texans have a fairly low burden in terms of vehicle registration costs relative to other states. At one point, I don't know that it was Chairman Williams, but somebody in the legislature, I remember, floated the possibility of modestly increasing the driver's license registration fee to try to put more revenue into. Of course, you'll hear people talk about, when was the last time we raised the gas tax? Are there additional sources of revenue that we should be considering and that you as a good conservative would consider to try to get at this problem?
Well, first of all,
Election Day is Tuesday.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding him of that.
Right. Don't worry, no one in your district is on Facebook.
Which he cares nothing about. Well, I posted it this morning.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Bam.
Okay. But I mean, I think you bring up a very good point in that, and I have to remind all of us that one of the reasons that Texas is so attractive is that we do have low registration fees, low taxes, low government. Okay, and there's always a balance of what's the right balance between that. Right. On the alternative vehicles, I absolutely agree with Representative Israel. We have got to do something to where where they're participating in this, because they're not participating outside of the vehicle sales tax. They're not participating in that. So we have to do something along those lines. I believe that there are some alternative things to do that might not involve us as Texas residents doing something, but there might be some alternatives to other people that come into our state on a regular basis, whether that's people that use our roads, okay, and maybe they're not paying their fair share because they're not registered here in Texas. Is there anything
literal free riders
along those
Right.
lines? So I think we have to look at all those first before we increase any burden.
I've heard over time the possibility of something like a vehicle, miles traveled. What is it? A vehicle miles traveled. Right.
The question of that is a privacy issue. Is how much does the government get involved in your? I mean, should the government really know how many miles? Is there a way to do that without people feeling like that we've been too intrusive? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe there is, but or maybe there's an incentive, right? Maybe there's an incentive if you allow that to happen.
Mr. Chairman, as a practical matter, you're now heading into a legislative session 2 months away. You're chairing a key committee of the Senate. You have been doing this work in the interim, of course. You know, if I ask you and if you choose to tell me, you know what's at the top of your list. So as you go into the Transportation Committee, what are the 2 or 3 agenda items that you think will be most important and be most likely to be tackled by your committee?
The probably preserving some of the tools. There's been talk about removing some of the tools that were in the toolbox.
Be specific, please.
We would never have gotten into tolling roads in Texas. There was a constitutional amendment that prohibited state money. And we would not have gotten into tolling and changed that constitution had the legislature properly funded roads.
Right.
Everybody knows, I think, that has studied this issue, that pay as you go is the most efficient long-term way to build roads and bridges in the state.
Right.
But we did not properly fund, so therefore we did add those tools. And there was an acceleration, dramatic acceleration of tolling in Texas. And also there's now a backlash from that.
Well, in fact, there's been a call by some members, I believe actually more members of the House than necessarily members of the Senate, but it may be even, to do a toll road moratorium.
And so those are the kind of issues you're going to come up.
Where are you on that, Chairman? Your voice on this is disproportionately influential. What do you think?
As I said, we would never have done tolling had we properly funded transportation.
Right, but at the same time, Chairman, we can't go back in time. I saw you gave an interview to the Athens newspaper a couple weeks ago, the Athens Daily Review, the community of Athens, their newspaper, which you actually, I read that as a favorable view of tolling, that you were like, well, look, I mean, tolling is not as bad as everybody says. It's a necessary part of the mix.
It's up to each community how they want to operate. If they want to accelerate construction and create more alternatives fast, quicker, instead of waiting on their money to come in to build, then that community can choose to do more tolling. If they choose not to, for instance, San Antonio has chosen not to.
Right.
And that's okay. That's San Antonio's choice. The Metroplex has chosen to do it. They may have gone overboard because they're getting a lot of backlash up there.
Right.
But these things will settle out. But when we reached the point in 2003, give or take, the entire state road budget, the entire budget was needed just to preserve the system. And we actually reached a point where that funding stream would not only not add any new capacity, but could not continue to preserve the system. And so what we began doing for a decade and a half was borrowing. The state borrowed.
Right.
We did a mobility fund, which created a revenue stream, borrowed $7 billion. We did 2 different propositions that went to the public. We borrowed $5 billion. We borrowed $6 billion the next time. We created over $20 billion in debt. We hit the legislative session in 2013. There were talks of century bonds, 100-year bonds for infrastructure. And the members said, no, we have got to solve this problem. We've got to properly fund transportation. We're not going to go borrowing.
Right. So what will you do on the toll issue? What should you do?
Educate members and to try to direct communities to, if they think they're going beyond what they really should be. What I'm more concerned about is the rates, as these bonds, construction bonds, are paid off, those rates need to come down. The best model, the oldest model, the most mature system is the Houston-Harris County toll system. They've been doing it since '86, '87. And so they have the very lowest toll rates in the state. And it's a big system. And what most people are not aware of is each year for the last 5 years, they have taken $120 million out of that toll revenue and put it into non-tolled roads for 5 years in a row. That's $600 million. That had they not done that, the property taxes would have had to made up that
So
difference.
you like that? You like the way they've done that?
Yeah, they've lowered it down, and Houston's not having a big backlash
Yeah.
Against what they've done. But they are continuing to add capacity, but they do it in a very orderly fashion.
Right.
And they are taking and preserving roads without having to raise property taxes. If you remove the tolls that are preserving that system, then how are they going to maintain and preserve
How are they
that
going to pay
road?
for
That
that?
would
Yeah,
have to
right.
be property taxes.
Let me ask Representative Simmons, you come from that area where, as Chairman Nichols says, has kind of gone overboard.
Right.
Or it's perceived by some to have gone overboard. How do you feel about tolls at the moment? What's your disposition to the tolling?
Similar to Senator Nichols, I think it's a local decision. I'm not sure the state should be involved in the tolling business per
So there
se.
is rumors of the death of local
Well,
control are exaggerated.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can cast your opinions on that at the time. But I think it's a local decision. The challenges that you have, and like my district is on the south border is George Bush Tollway. On the east border is the Dallas North Tollway, and on the north border is the Sam Rayburn. All right. And on the west border is now going to be I-35E expanded, but with a couple managed lanes in it. Now, so the fact of the matter is, it's very hard to get out of my district on a thoroughfare without paying some
hitting a toll,
without paying some type of toll.
Right.
However, it was very hard to even get out of the district before those were built. Okay, the Sam Rayburn is a very good example. Had we had the foresight, and I'm not blaming anybody in here or anywhere for anything, but had we had the foresight to know what the economic development was going to be along Sam Rayburn, I mean, it's incredible because it was really mostly just raw land. We probably could have done something other than toll that. We probably could have done a TRZ on that one, and it was Transportation Reinvestment Zone, where you take the rise in property taxes or even sales taxes and paid for that, okay? I believe that, Senator Nichols. What we need to be doing, though, is working towards how do those toll roads eventually become free roads. That's what people want. It
Can't happen overnight.
No, and we may have to set up, instead of using it to build other free roads, is just set up a sinking fund for maintenance purposes, because the TxDOT will have to take over that maintenance. Those are state roads.
Correct.
And so maybe a sinking fund has to go away. The other thing that I do think that we'll look at, and I know the tolling people may not like this, but I've told them all individually, is I think that we will look at system financing. What happens is you have a toll road in one part of town that it's paid for the most part, and produces extra revenue, and it's used to build a potential toll road in another part of town. The question is whether or not, I mean, I understand why it's done, but the question is whether or not that's something that we need to look at and tighten up on. I don't know the answer to that long term, but it's something.
But I guess
that
what
we
I'm
need to
hearing,
look at.
Representative Simmons, is you are not, as a matter of fact, or as a matter of policy, opposed to toll roads.
I think it's
as some of your colleagues are.
I think it's the last resort.
But it's not a no resort.
It's not a no resort, but I think the local people have to make the decision. I want the city councils and the county commissioners, in fact, I'm going to have a bill that says you have to pass a resolution. Now, it's not binding on the RTC, the transportation, but you have to pass a resolution so your citizens know where you stand.
Yeah.
Because right now, they can hide behind everything else.
Representative Israel, last night I had to leave my office in downtown Austin at about 5 o'clock and get up to an event at Southwestern University in Georgetown. And rather than take Interstate, I was sorry I had to do it. Rather than take Interstate 35, I took that jog over to 130.
Yeah.
And I got on 130, went 80 miles an hour, got up there in pretty good time. I mean, you know, it's easy to be against toll roads in theory until you have to get someplace and you get on one. Once you go toll, you don't go back. Right? And so, I mean, I'm sitting here as a practical matter going, the state is growing quickly, the congestion problem is a thing.
Yeah.
This is a mix of options. And good advocates for liberty, of which we have a few up on the stage, understand that it can be the choice of the individual to either get on a free road and sit in traffic or get on a paid road if they choose to pay and go. I just wonder if this controversy has maybe much ado about nothing.
The controversy about
About
toll roads?
tolls, yeah.
Well, it's a very real, my district also is surrounded by toll roads, and I think there's a number of factors that have been going on over the last couple of sessions that every urban city in America is feeling the affordability crisis. Your house costs more.
Right. Housing affordability is part of this conversation,
and
isn't it?
housing
That's right.
affordability is part of it. So my constituents live in Pflugerville, outlying areas of Pflugerville, new schools, new rooftops, and $6 a day on that 130 is painful. So I'm with my colleagues here that if I can be a part of helping to set up a plan to say that could eventually be a $3 toll or a $2 toll, so it's just maintenance, I would agree with that. But I would say that there's a role for the state of Texas to play in those outlying areas who want to have their husband or spouse just drop them off at the park and ride in Round Rock, and then they catch a bus into Austin. Why can't the state of Texas, and I think we can work on this, if we want to pull down more transit dollars from the feds always will look more kindly upon you when you're looking at things from a regional perspective, across county lines and across jurisdictional lines. So those are transit dollars that we wouldn't get. So we're working with TxDOT on a project in Northeast Travis County and into Williamson County to say we can plan for the future. We can incorporate transit, and because we're incorporating transit, it makes it an attractive project to say yes to transit dollars that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten.
Wouldn't get.
And it's not a whole lot of money. Rail is hugely expensive. But if we can put a state-of-the-art, a high-capacity rubber tire that not everybody is going to use, but I found that people are not anti-transit, they're anti-inefficiency. So let's work with our engineering community and the state and planners to say, well, let's work on projects that can pull down more money that we otherwise would not have had.
Chairman Nichols, to this question of alternatives to getting in your car and driving from place to place, as you know, there's a conversation about rail between the cities, high-speed rail. That's something that has come up over the last couple sessions. There was an objection to the idea that somehow public dollars would go to that. That's at least been the conversation over many years. Now there's a plan that promises that private dollars will be used to fund that. That would be, like Representative Israel says, not everybody's going to take advantage of that, and it's only point to point in certain places, but it is a way to get some cars off the highways. Will you and your colleagues in the Transportation Committee look favorably upon such a plan?
There is a mixed group in the Transportation Committee. That's assuming the Transportation Committee stays the same.
Right.
There are those on the committee that support it. There are those on the committees who oppose it.
Yeah.
What
are the top line issues here, for and against?
Okay, number one, they say they're going to run it for profit, strictly private, not use state money, government money. But when I spoke with them, they told me that they were going to borrow between $4 and $5 billion of federal money through TIFIA, which is a subordinated note, which is backed up by our taxes. Number two, there is not a single high-speed rail on this planet that operates without a subsidy, that the money would be built building it, and once the profit is taken away from constructing it, I do not believe that it can operate and even break even. And then you're going to have a 200-mile wall going across Texas through the rural districts with somebody saying, well, we can't operate it, so y'all have got to help us fund this thing. So we're concerned that they'll be coming back for a subsidy at some point after it proves operationally ineffective. And number 4 or 5 or wherever I am on that list, the people who live in the country don't want a rail train running through their property every 20 minutes.
Mr. Simmons, I hear a hell of a bill of particulars from the chairman. I'm not. I heard a lot of shade being thrown on this project by the chairman.
The chairman and I would disagree on this issue.
It's getting good now. This is great.
Not his facts necessarily, because I respect him for that, and I understand the rural concerns. I really do. However, the high-speed rail, if it can be done with private money, and we all have that concern, they're going to have to prove that. The states absolutely said we're not going to use any of our money. Then I think it's a project that we have to see that it come to its on fruition, is to see what happens to that. I think it would be something that would be utilized. Now, it's not going to be utilized by people in the rural areas very much, that's for sure. I understand that.
Right.
But it's going to be utilized by people in the major cities, and you just pointed out that we have 70% of our population live in the large cities. We understand
75% of our population is east of I-35.
and it's going to be very popular right here because we're going to pick up all those kids and we're going to take them back to their homes and all that stuff where they come from, to this university and others. So I'm excited about seeing how the project works out. And under no uncertain terms would I ever approve any state money for that project, but I'm excited to see about it. I think they can overcome. It's got a very small footprint. It's going to be built on a viaduct mainly type system, okay, so it's going to have as minimal intrusion as you can. And you know, the challenge is there's nothing for the state to do to allow it to happen, all right? Yeah. The state would have to stop it, and we'll have to see if there's legislation to do that.
Representative Israel, before we go to questions from the audience, is there anything that you would like to see on the agenda that you think either won't be because of the crush of other issues that are going to be more pressing? I mean, this is a case where you get to have a wish list. It costs nothing. There's no consequence to have a wish list, to be aspirational. What are we not talking about in the realm of transportation policy that we should be talking about?
Well, I can't go in a transportation forum without talking about my telecommuting bill for state employees that I hope will get passed, because there's value to just simply having people work more efficiently from home from time to time.
Disproportionately affects Central Texas, but would have impact elsewhere potentially too.
Yes, and I think if I were queen, I would say we should, although we should have been planning for this in generations in the past, there's no time like the present to at least start. I think with the ups and the downs of the energy sector that Texas knows like no other country, we should be indexing so that when gas goes down, we're putting a nickel, a penny, a dime, just putting some money away so that we are planning for the future and we have a true transportation fund. Right now we have, you know, the holy grail called the rainy day fund that apparently we can't touch, but we should have a fund so that when gas goes down in price, we're putting money aside, and people appreciate that I talk to in my district. So I would love to have us have a discussion about indexing, but unfortunately that becomes politically unpalatable.
Well, let me ask the chairman, do you want to squelch the Queen's desire here to have such a fund?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
You like that idea?
He says a girl can have her dreams. Right?
But you were talking about issues that aren't being talked about that much. I didn't know if you were switching over to me on that.
Please.
The transportation networks, the Ubers, the Lyft, the things like that, I think that's going to be a...
Is that going to come through your committee? I know that there's a move afoot to try to regain some control over the local decisions around that, which are inconsistent from jurisdiction
in
to
the
jurisdiction.
Senate, that would be strictly up to Lieutenant Governor Patrick,
Right.
which committee that went to.
Right.
But it was I know there was a lot of conversation about it in the House.
Yep.
Right.
We had actually quite a bit of conversation in the Senate. I know I put together a work group with all parties, put the big cities and small, the taxi people, the insurance people, the trial lawyers.
So you're expecting rideshare to hit your committee? Ride hailing, whatever we
I
call
would
it
think
these
there
days.
would be a high probability, but that, like I said, that's up to Lieutenant Governor.
Okay. Mr. Simmons, before we go to the audience, do you have a wish list item that you'd like to see show up on the agenda?
My only wish list is for us to make sure that we're implementing the legislation we put in last year appropriately.
Right.
And that's what I'm going to be
Before we start layering on
involved
a
in.
bunch of new stuff.
House Bill 20, which did the projects on how we select projects and how the commission allocated funds to the various categories. I'm more interested in making sure that gets done correctly.
Very good.
Evan, can I add one more item?
I wish you would, please.
Oh, yeah. Go
there's
ahead.
one
You're
more
queen,
item
you can
that-
add whatever you want.
That I wish. I would also like to raise the issue of the fact that last year we had the most dangerous year on Texas roads than we've had before. And I think that we should be addressing the issue of public safety. That should mean a number of ways that we can not just accept that Texans die on Texas. We lost over 3,500 people last year.
We haven't had a fatality-free day.
November 7th, 2000.
So it's been almost 16 years since we've had a fatality-free day on Texas roads.
We can do a number of things.
What
TxDOT has
can
answers
we
for.
do about that, though?
We can do barriers through roads so that we're not having head-on collisions.
Right.
We can do rumble strips so that a tired driver is waking up. These are proven to have improvements. We can put a statewide ban on distracted driving, whether that means texting or not.
Right.
So, and TxDOT just recently finished a subcommittee study
We
about
can
safety.
also make sure that universities like this one and the one in Austin
Hey,
really crack down
The one
on
in
underage
Austin.
drinking.
underage drinking.
Absolutely. It happens on every college campus. It's a big, big issue. And when they drink, they get in the car.
I'd like to ask the two of you about the texting while driving or distracted driving stuff. This has come up previously
Yes.
in sessions.
Every session.
It seems like a no-brainer, but maybe I'm just not thinking about it through the political door.
I don't know why it's been
What-
so
what-
hard.
what do you say about
It
that?
basically, every session gets out of the House, comes over to the Senate, it gets killed in the Senate. Last session, I was for it, elimination of texting while driving.
Yeah.
But the votes were not there in my committee.
Who are the culprits killing that bill?
Didn't Governor Perry veto it
He vetoed
yes, he
it
did.
when he was governor,
twice or once?
2013.
once.
2013.
He vetoed it in 2013. You think it'll come back around?
I think it was 2011.
2011?
In 2013, it came up again, so we did not have a public hearing. Why have a hearing and vote when he has already vetoed
So
it?
what would you?
So when it
like?
came up under Abbott,
Yeah.
we were working in the Senate to try to send it to the floor, but we could not get the votes in my committee.
Will it come back up?
It
Will you
will
bring
come-
it back up since you support it? And you're the powerful chairman?
Oh, yeah. I can assure you it will come back
It'll
up.
be Speaker Craddock's. That's been his bill.
And I will tell you, there was a commercial, federal implementation of
Right.
commercial standards on trucks that included a ban on texting, and that bill died twice. We were fixing to be penalized $350 million at the state because it did not have a prohibition for texting for truck drivers, and we could not pass that. So we carved that out past the rest of the
Yeah.
bill. We were not fined, but we've got a problem there.
Okay, I've gone a little bit over my time. We have some time for questions, and Jessica's got a microphone, and we'll be happy to bring anybody with a question for these three good folks into the conversation. Please put your hand up, and we're happy to call on you. Sir? Believe me, they would rather you ask more questions than me, so.
Okay. There was a discussion in Houston yesterday. There was a transportation forum there, and the discussion in 2 or 3 sessions focused on the consideration of raising the truck weights and fees that may go along to balance, add an axle to trucks so they could carry more. And I guess part of the theory was a lot of containers are coming over partially empty because, if you load them up, they're overweight. And just wanted to see what the panel's thoughts on that idea is. I know there's, pros and cons. This is particularly along heavy haul routes
Right.
in port areas.
Well, we have a lot of those, though. So, what do you say?
I've worked on these kind of things for about 20 years. There have been approaches in the past just to raise the weights without making any other accommodations. And generally, I've always opposed that I've always opposed that because it damages the roadways with increased stress in an exponential manner. And also people forget about our bridges. So, but on the coast where our ports have a lot of containerized, and not just the seaports, but also our inland ports with Mexico, there's a lot of heavyweight traffic. And our industries, particularly our manufacturers on the coast, to be competitive with other states so that they will locate here, and to keep them competitive with other countries, we need to come up with a way to increase the weight, maximize the weight inside that container for export, okay? And so we have been working in our office on a configuration that will actually do less damage and be safer because you have more axle braking ability. And so that is the direction I'm working on and look to have a bill filed for a specific route within a certain distance of the ports to carry those containerized traffics only on routes that are approved by TxDOT. So that there is a truth to the rumor. If the rumor's out there, I've not hidden from that, and we'll be trying to explain to the whole world why we need to do this as a state.
But there could be increased cost based on the weight. I mean, that's
Sure.
one of the discussions
Right.
is to help
Right.
cover the
Yeah,
extra
so
stress on the
they would have to
roads.
pay a substantial
To cover the
permit
extra stress
fee.
on the roads.
Larger
That's
fee for
right.
that, right? Okay. Sir?
Hi, my name is Gary Schatz. I'm a traffic engineer, so don't hold that against me.
You're failing so far. Come on, Gary. We need you to do better.
I'm originally from Arkansas, like you are.
Oh, there you
fair
go. Well,
warning.
that's part of the reason we had dirt roads, so I understand.
Absolutely.
Pavement was a whole new thing for us when we
It
got
was.
there.
This is
So
like
were
open mic
shoes.
night, isn't it? Boy, okay.
We
Shoes
could do
were
this
new,
all
too.
day.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I've been a city traffic engineer for 3 different cities in Texas, and where Representative Israel, you mentioned safety. All of you mentioned safety. Safety improvements generally come out of O&M dollars. They don't come out of the funds that the
For the benefit of
legislator.
civilians, O&M is
Operations and maintenance.
Okay,
Thank
just
you.
making sure.
But the monies that are set aside for new construction coming up, we're very grateful for those. Those are definitely needed. The challenge we run into at the local level is the solution is, we hear a lot of times, well, why don't you time the dang lights better? What we run into is we agree that they can be better, but to a point. And to attract and retain the quality staff to do that is challenging. The people in the industry who have that art, that knack, are few and far between. City of Austin, when I was there 2010 to 2014, all of the staff, and considering everything else they had, with 1,000 signals, we had in effect 1 funded position that timed 1,000 signals. They now have about 4. And the national recommended number is 1 technician per every 100 signals, maybe 120. So we're real short on the O&M side, and a lot of that is funding positions and the benefits and et cetera that go with it.
And that's a local decision.
It's a local decision, and a big chunk of local government's monies do go to police, fire, EMS.
Right.
And everybody else gets what's
Is
left.
there a place for the state in this conversation?
In the safety?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I will point out, which we did not point out a while ago, on the Transportation Commission, when they put their new unified transportation plan and allocated a lot more dollars, they substantially increased the amount of dollars going to safety all over the state. And these safety things can be rail crossings, they can be
Rumble strips.
rumble strips,
Just
they
as I
can
like to
be
say, rumble strips.
turning lanes, they can be shoulders, they can be unusual intersections. And those have proven continuously over the years to save lives. So that's a big step.
Great. I'm getting the we're out of time signal as it is 9:20, and we promised to have a break before the next panel. We're very honored, especially during a very busy time in election season, to have these 3 with us. Please thank Representative Israel, Chairman Nichols, and Representative Simmons. We will be back in 10 minutes. Take a break.